Grieving family notice strange woman standing over casket and are crushed by what she does. Death is just a fact of life, and the older we get, the more this grim facet of our existence seems to move to the forefront of our lives. We lose grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, friends, siblings, and we press on, despite our grief, because we must. Tabitha's family was doing their best to come to terms with her untimely, yet totally natural death, when they became embroiled in something that none of them had ever anticipated. It began with a strange face at a wake. Dearly departed. At merely 38 years old, there's no denying that, natural causes or not, Tabitha had died young. When she passed away, she left behind a mother, a brother, nephews, nieces, and kids of her own. In short, a whole family of people that loved and supported her throughout her life. Not one of those people, however, were aware that she had also left behind an enemy. Who's that girl? Tabitha's immediate family had come to the funeral home a little earlier than the normal crowd in order to pay their respects in private. Before they could enter the viewing area, however, they noticed a woman that none of them had ever seen before, standing next to the casket. She told the family that she was there to help. Makeup artist. The strange woman explained that she was a skilled makeup artist who had been retained by the funeral home to put a few last-minute touches on the deceased. She explained how sorry she was for their loss and asked them to step out of the room for a few minutes so that she could finish her work. When they returned, she was gone. Terrible sight. A few minutes later, funeral director Robert Gardner heard a scream erupt from inside Tabitha's viewing room. He assumed, as one does when one owns a funeral home, that the scream was not one of panic but of grief. It wasn't until two girls came running into his office with horrified looks on their faces that he knew something was actually wrong. Desecration. The girls told Mr. Gardner that someone, likely the makeup artist they had seen in the room earlier, had pulled a glob of hair from Tabitha Lynch's head and dropped it on the floor in front of the casket. They also noted that the makeup on Tabitha's face has been smeared, and as if that weren't enough, the body had been even further desecrated. A terrible sight. Tabitha's mother, Charlotte Wheeler, came in next and told Mr. Gardner that the stranger had also slashed her daughter's face from the top of her hairline to the tip of her nose. She had makeup and lipstick smeared all over her face. Her hair was just all over the place, she explained. The police were soon called. Call the cops. The police arrived and found the same things as the family, the cut, the hair upon the floor, but no other clues as to who the mysterious makeup artist could be. It wasn't until some time later, when the funeral parlor staff took Tabitha into the back to fix her up, that they found out the true extent of the woman's desecrations. Some alterations. The vile woman had not only altered Tabitha's visage, but had apparently also cut off her breasts, and a toe as well. As if all that weren't enough, she'd even stolen her shoes. Unlike the locks of hair, those missing body parts were nowhere to be found. As for the culprit, cops would locate her soon enough in the most unlikely of places. Insult and injury. Following procedure, the police headed to Tabitha Lynch's apartment to investigate and ended up running into the very same makeup artist, who had her hands in the casket. Apparently her desecration of the dearly departed was not enough. She had to break into Tabitha's apartment and take a few keepsakes for the road. Caught her. Police patted the woman down and found a folding knife which contained hair matching Tabitha's. She also had a pair of scissors, a box cutter, and several cosmetics. A little background check into the culprit and they finally had a name, Shayna Lauren Sims of Miami. But why had she done it? Revenge. The reason for Sims' unabashed desecration of a woman she hardly knew was fairly straightforward. Apparently, she believed that her husband had cheated on her with Tabitha Lynch and she wanted retribution, which Tabitha had, up till now, refused. The two women were known as frenemies, and were often in competition with one another. Why do it? Yet revenge or not, it still seems puzzling that someone would do the things they did during a funeral, in front of so many people. It's just as puzzling that no one bothered to check what she was doing when she reached into the casket. Perhaps it's just that people didn't want to know what she was doing in there and so they didn't bother to look. Such a thing was most shocking to the funeral home. Couldn't believe it. In all these years I've worked in the funeral industry, I've never seen that happen, explained Greg Lee, another funeral director at Moore's East Lawn Funeral Home. It wasn't just the situation that couldn't be believed, it was also Shayna's frame of mind. I didn't even know she'd be capable of doing that, said Sims' now estranged husband, Monty Smith. Competent, not crazy. Sims' defense attorney was hoping that their client's history of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia might help make it possible for an insanity plea. Unfortunately, neither the doctors nor the judge were convinced. After being examined by a forensic psychologist, Sims was found mentally competent and the trial could proceed as planned. Many charges. Sims had a number of charges against her including larceny and knowingly concealing stolen property, for stealing the shoes, first-degree burglary for deceiving Lynch's son in order to enter their apartment, unauthorized dissection, and unlawful removal of body parts from a corpse. She of course pleaded not guilty on all counts. Violent assault. The prosecution was backed slightly by the fact that Ms. Sims had another case pending against her at the time of her arrest. 2 weeks before, Sims pled guilty to an assault and battery charge where she was caught on tape aggressively bumping into a woman she'd been stalking and harassing for months. That woman was Christina Perez, who apparently dated Sims' husband 5 years prior. Harassment. Christina Perez had something with Monty Smith 5 years ago, before marrying her current husband, and yet Sims took it upon herself to begin harassing her. The harassment got so bad that she filed a petition for a protective order against her. Meanwhile, Sims had filed several protective orders against Perez as well, though none of them were granted. Guilty. During the course of court proceedings, the jury at Shayna Sims' current trial was shown pictures of her handiwork, and that seemed enough to sway most of them towards a guilty verdict. The Oklahoma jury found her guilty of 5 charges related to mutilating a corpse and recommended Sims serve 16 years in prison, including 7 years in prison for first-degree burglary and 5 years for her removal of the deceased body parts. Return to the scene. Not to be deterred by something as innocuous as prison time, Sims' early release last June resulted in her backsliding a bit. She had been released on bond on the condition that she not enter Tulsa County except for medical appointments and emergencies. She of course violated the terms of this release and returned to Tabitha's apartment. Her purpose? To try and obtain a cell phone from a pop-up phone stand in the apartment complex. Back in the slammer, she was noticed by the complex manager and 2 other women who recognized her. They could also see she was wearing a GPS ankle monitor and had been wearing a wig to disguise herself. The courts revoked her bond and sent her back to prison. Thanks for watching this videos and don't forget to subscribe to channel for more new videos.